Hello, welcome. It's episode 168 of Grow Yourself Up. Delighted to be back with you. And today I want to talk about something that's really, really vital in our own mental health and our state of being and our ability to be in the world, which is our sensory systems, our sensory integration, and how we process sensory information as it comes into our body. And many of us have, we all have a variability in this because we are all different sensory beings. And it's got a huge impact on how we turn up in the world and how we feel mentally. So I think it's really something very important to consider in families. And particularly if there's any neurodivergence, there's more likely to be differences in sensory processing or some challenges in sensory processing. One of the interventions that's often helpful is sensory integration therapy. That's not always accessible, but I want to just talk about some things that I see play out in my own household and ways that you can start to become more aware of this. Because as with many things, awareness means we can provide support for both ourselves and our children, and it also really removes shame and helps us be prepared for situations, because once you understand more about what's going on, you can work to support or problem solve that. And it's sometimes really difficult in parenting when your children react in ways that you really don't understand, and it can kind of bring our own shame, our own confusion, our own anger, our own sadness to the fore. And so kind of gaining more understanding of this can be really helpful to manage that. So I want to just give you like a very small recap. I'm going to do a lot more on sensory stuff. I've done some training in that. And I'm considering doing some more, but I think that I want to talk about this in the first instance because trauma has many, many impacts. We know that it has many impacts in terms of how we respond to stress. So we tend to have an exaggerated stress response. Sometimes we have a very dulled stress response. So we might tend to be hypo-aroused in response to stress if we've had way too much stress. It impacts, we have many different behaviors that that come about as a result of trauma. I'm often talking about perfectionism, people-pleasing, controlling, perhaps we need to dissociate a lot. Those are coping strategies or our survival strengths. And there's something that is really crucial, and that is that it impacts the way that our sensory systems develop. And so kind of early trauma, even later trauma can all really impact what input we're getting and how our sensory systems are then coded for life. And I have a theory also that modern parenting practices may result in babies who don't get enough sensory input because there's not enough opportunities to do what a body may need to do, because we're often containing children and we maybe don't let them have enough kind of freedom of movement, or our own anxieties mean we may stop them exploring a bit. I'm going to go into that. Don't worry about that now. I want to kind of delve into that in more detail, but that's a kind of a working theory that I'm pondering on. For the moment, I want to talk to you at a sort of a general high level about the sensory systems, and then talk specifically about interoception a bit, and specifically temperature, and then our tactile system, including deep pressure touch. So just kind of a very high level thing, and you maybe all know this already, but the body has 5 basic sensory systems. So we have hearing, our auditory system. We have taste, our gustatory system. Smell, olfactory system. Our touch, our somatosensory system. And that's where our tactile system, including deep pressure touch, would fall into. And we have sight, so our visual system. So those are the 5 ones that you would probably know. So sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. And in addition to that, there are 3 systems which are also our sensory systems, which are really, really important. So those are our vestibular system, our proprioceptive system and our interoceptive system. So I'm going to give you a bit more detail about all of those, because those really, really impact how we turn up in the world, and how we behave, and how we learn how we need to behave to be in our social group, essentially. Because initially, and I talked about this right in the first episode, babies are receiving, I think it's 1 billion bits of sensory information, maybe a minute. I can't remember the stats I quoted, but like a huge amount of sensory information comes into our system all of the time. And we use all these systems to try and understand our experience, and our brain will code it. So our nervous system gets this incoming sensory information and then sends messages to our brain. So our brain is busy taking information all day, all night from our 8 sensory systems, and making sense of it, and then helping us respond in an appropriate way. And none of this is happening. This happens under our awareness, so it's not happening consciously. And we can bring it to consciousness in order to notice what's going on for ourselves and to improve our own experience. So when we notice our own sensory experience, we can then kind of shift and change it. So we need this input to understand the world around us, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to understand how to operate. And we initially, when we're first born, we can take in sensory information, but we become more kind of skilled and more refined in terms of what information we pay attention to. Our auditory system is our hearing, and it's located in the inner ear, and it's stimulated by sound waves, and it gives information about what is happening to us. If we, and this is the case for many children who may or may not be neurodivergent, but if we have a low auditory threshold, so we have a low threshold for auditory sounds, we may be find some sounds very difficult and may cover our ears. So, for example, my girls used to be very distracted if we heard an aeroplane flying overhead. So we live in southwest London, so there are often planes that go overhead or kind of just on the side of the sky, and that would totally distract. We'd have to kind of run outside to have a look at the plane. We couldn't focus on anything else because we were just focused on this auditory input. If we went into a bathroom, they really struggled with the hand dryers, the loudness of the hand dryer, and they would hate the hand dryer, and they wouldn't want to go into bathrooms because of that. If there was someone who was mowing their lawn, they would also equally get very distracted by that, and sirens also. So it used to be that there was just quite a lot of distress. And then as they've got older, and as we've done a lot of work on integrating primitive reflexes, where there's a big sensory component, and they have also had sensory integration therapy, they have become more able to filter that out. So their threshold for sounds has actually increased. They get less distracted and less distressed, and they can kind of manage around that. But, I think it's very interesting to consider our auditory system in the context of trauma, because our auditory system gives us a sign, signals us danger before we often hear things, way before we see things. And so if you grew up in a house where there was a lot of fighting or violence or angry voices, or you knew the mood of one of your parents when they slammed the door when they came in, and immediately you knew how you needed to be to manage that, we might have a very kind of overdeveloped auditory response, and be really kind of tuned into that in order to keep ourselves safe. So that's kind of one interesting thing. Okay, I've kind of already gone on into more areas than I wanted to go into, because there's like so much to say, and I'm so excited to talk to you, and I've got so many ideas, and I find it kind of complicated to channel them in ways that are useful. So I have to ask for guidance about what would be useful. Anyway, so that's kind of just about the auditory system. So if you've got a child who is very defended against various sounds, who gets very easily distracted, like my girls, or maybe they make a noise to block out that noise, because if you're having if a hand dryer, for example, is very annoying, or if you don't like the sounds of planes, you might engage in very noisy play, or make the same sound repeatedly in order to drown out that noise that you find overwhelming. Because at least if you're making the sound, you're in control of it then. This might be that your child needs to wear headphones. You might also need to wear headphones, or those like earplug things. That can be really helpful with sounds. Some people have what is termed a high threshold with auditory input, and they need more auditory input to kind of for that to register in their own system. And this can be people who appear not to hear. Maybe they generate their own personal noise and sounds to give themselves that input, but that can also be done by people who have a high threshold, as I mentioned, if they're trying to drown out something that's overwhelming. And they may be really fascinated by certain sounds, so they might make those sounds repeatedly. So it's really such an interesting area. But the why I wanted to talk about this is because balancing sensory needs in a family is often extremely complex, and often we don't quite understand what is being, what's going on. So I want to talk about two really common things. First one is temperature. So I talked about our interoception. So our interoception is our internal sense of what's going on with our body. So our interoception is how we pick up our internal body signals. So data that's coming from our own body. This is also compromised in trauma. Sometimes we over-respond to our interoception. Sometimes we under-respond to our interoception. But we can internally pick up things like our heartbeat, our hunger, so sensations of hunger, sensations of thirst, sensations of, do I need to go to the loo? Like, am I bursting for a wee? Have we hurt ourselves? Did we cut our finger? How quickly are we aware of our pain? If no one has tended to our pain, we may need to dull that physical pain. So we might not respond to pain receptors as much. And our temperature is also something that's really important. So I notice when we have transitions in our house, so one of my daughters, first of all, runs very hot. She runs hotter than her sister. And when she gets flustered, or when she's trying to do something that she needs to persist with, I often help her by taking off a layer of clothing. She finds some things frustrating, and then she gets more worked up about it, and she gets hotter. And so then she gets that sort of tends to drive more aggravation. So I've noticed that if I really help her by taking off a layer of clothing or helping her notice she's getting hot, that helps her tolerate the task at hand better because she's more comfortable in her body. I notice that I get hot when we get in transitions, especially when we're all crowded in the hallway, and I can get really kind of short, or this word I use, which is ratty, which is kind of like, I don't know, kind of grumpy and irritable very quickly when I get hot. Because trying to all get ready in a small space, that I find overwhelming because I feel crowded and my body temperature rises, and then I get more irritable. So I have found spreading us out really helpful. I have found opening the front door really helpful. So small things that you can become aware of, or actually just spreading out and getting ready in the kitchen so we don't all have to crowd and put our shoes on in the hallway. And because otherwise what can happen is that every time you make a transition out of the house, everyone loses it purely because the sensory environment is overwhelming. And within the context of your family, you'll have different sensory needs. So you might have someone who really needs a lot of sounds, so say if you've got someone who likes to make a lot of their own sounds because they are under responsive, I'm back on the auditory thing, that might be really jarring for you or for one of your other family members. So if you've got a child who really likes to wear their ear defenders all the time because they find sound overwhelming, if they've got a sibling who's constantly like drumming or like making jarring singing sounds, that's just going to make life kind of hellish all the time because of those competing sensory needs. So notice what happens in your house. Like Do some people have a high threshold? Do some people have a low threshold? What are they seeking out? And we can do this in a loving, judgmental way. We all process sensory information differently. Yes, we may have had our sensory systems, like the processing of our sensory integration maybe have been challenged by trauma, and the way our sensory systems developed may have been impacted by trauma, but that doesn't mean we need to put any value judgments on any of this. So really be kind of try and just remove any moral judgment or any shaming or criticizing. Everyone just has different sensory requirements. We can work to shift that and make experiencing life easier. So my girls, life has got much easier for them after sensory integration therapy because it's easier to exist in the world. It's less jarring for them. Sometimes I think I should go for sensory integration therapy. Maybe I would find some things less jarring. Anyway, so let me talk about, so that's about the temperature. So really noticing, are you sensitive to temperature? Are your children sensitive to temperature? What can you do for that? Because often if we get, so going back to our interoception, that's again how I'm feeling my internal body temperature. If I get hot and I get sort of irritated and kind of exasperated, my heart rate is going to go up. And then everything starts to get more stressed. I'm getting more out of my window of tolerance. And so managing our sensory experience helps us remain more in our window of tolerance. And then we can, part of some of the work we've done on primitive reflexes is challenging, say, the vestibular system with spinning and with touch to increase the window of tolerance around some of these sensory experiences. That's kind of quite technical there, but yeah, okay. Let me talk now about the touch system. Okay, so touch, which is our tactile system, so like how we feel things, including deep pressure touch. It tells us all about the world around us. Babies touch everything when they're small. They even touch it by eating a lot of objects, and it helps us. It helps us with our orientation. About in the darkness, we can notice what objects are. If you wake up and need to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, you don't often need to turn on the light. You can touch. Or even if you want to turn on the light, you touch on the wall where the light switch is, because you know that, and you can orient by using your hands to touch the switch. Or you can have a sip of your water in the night, which is sitting on your bedside table, without needing to turn on the light, because again, you're orienting using your hands. If you put your hands into a handbag or a suitcase or a cupboard, you can also orient without looking. You can just use your touch system. And again, that's also, it's a very, we need to use our touch for protective reasons. So we learn as children not to touch hot surfaces, because that really, it gives us a warning, don't burn yourself. So that's all of those touch receptors. I mean, we've got touch receptors in lots of places, but our hands are very loaded with those. And there's a lot of things that we do, which you may not actually realize your touch system. So like when you do your hair, if you do, if I'm doing my children's hair, my girls' hair, I can do a pony or a hair pony or a plait. I'm also seeing it. So I can also do that. If I'm doing a plait, I can hold the 3 strands of a plait and plait the plait in their hair without looking at it. But because I'm doing someone else's hair, I have my visual system as well. When I do that in my own hair, I'm just using touch. I'm knowing where my hair is. I'm gathering up my hair, and I know, I've got all the hair to put into a pony, because I'm using my hands to tell me that. And then I know how to put the hair bobble around, to twist it, to pull my hair through. That's all my touch system. And I want to share with you a story about my own daughter, which is really relevant for touch and helps me understand some of the stuff around clothing preferences. So if we have, there's a term from occupational therapy called high thresholds and low thresholds for the tactile system. So if we have a high threshold for touch, we may bump into things and not notice. We may constantly touch people and things to the point of really being quite annoying. We might have to constantly gather sensory touch information from the environment. We might be constantly fidgeting or turning things in our hands because we need that input for our system. We may not notice, and this is something that I notice, we may not notice when we've got food around our mouth because we might need to have a whole cake stuck on the side of our face before we notice, oh, you've actually got a bit of icing there, or you've got some tomato there on the side of your face. That small bit of food might not be enough for you to kind of register. So it might look like you are kind of messy or dirty because you've got food around your mouth, but actually you're not registering it. It might look like, and this is something that I've really noticed, I've got one daughter who, when she eats cucumbers, specifically cucumbers, she shoves in so much, and it's related to both proprioception and touch. So she needs proprioceptive input in her mouth to really, quite a lot, to really feel that it's there. And she also needs the touch, the deep pressure, tactile experience of having a lot in her mouth. So this might be children who really appear to stuff their faces, and even adults who stuff their faces because they're actually seeking out that input. And it's really, really such useful information because I'm always, what do I say to her? I'm saying, because it also makes one of my daughters vomit because she overstuffs and she might not chew enough. And this is massively improved also with primitive reflex work, but and with age. But if you're overstuffing your mouth, then you're more likely to choke, essentially. And so I have this word I use. What is it? I say to her, "Don't shove." I think it's "don't shove." And I really have to step away from doing that because I'm trying not to kind of crowd her own experience. But I have to sometimes remind her to not shove and to wait till she's finished chewing before she shoves in more. Otherwise, she just vomits. But it's helpful because there's so many messages we have around what manners look like in our society. But if we have a high threshold and we need more input for our system to register, we'll just keep on doing this. And there's no kind of badness or deficit or moral judgment here. This is just something that our system is seeking. If you've got a low threshold for touch, you might find things like teeth brushing absolute torture because it feels too much for your system. You might be really bothered by clothing, so seams, labels, socks which are not soft enough. Even when you buy socks often, if they're nice soft cotton socks, they're easy to put on initially and you can kind of smooth them onto your feet. And then as soon as they get washed, they change consistency and they might get a lot harder and they shrink a bit. So then they may be much harder to put on and they may be registered in the system as really kind of unpleasant. People who have low thresholds may want very smooth clothes. So like bamboo clothing with no seams, lycra with no seams, nothing that kind of jars on the system. They might want to only wear certain clothing and certain textures. And that's dependent from, some people might really like fleece. And the story that I... Again, let me just tell you the rest of some of the other things about low thresholds. Someone with a low touch threshold may move away when other people get too close. I know some people where they stand so close to you, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you so much in my space? And they may have such a high threshold that they need to be really close to actually kind of feel like they're connecting. And so that's obviously not a helpful match. If someone has got a low threshold, they will need to move away. And someone with a low threshold for touch doesn't want unexpected or touch that they don't know is coming. So, for example, in giving context about I am going to give you a hug or would you like a hug is helpful for someone who is low threshold for touch, because then it's not, then they can anticipate it, and that gives, telling about context always gives our nervous system a sign of safety. But I think that the focusing on the impact of trauma on our sensory systems is just a really essential part of this work. And recently, I bought a purple hoodie for one of my daughters, like a zip up, lovely cotton, sort of soft and like furry on the inside, but cotton furry and zip up. And I had taken them both to the shops together, and they both wanted the same hoodie, and so I got them each this purple hoodie, and they appeared to like it. And then one day, my one daughter was getting ready for school, and I was like, "Why don't you wear your purple hoodie?" And she had bought it with me. So I was like, and she was like, no, she doesn't want a purple hoodie. And I was kind of getting aggravated of like, just bought you this purple hoodie. You really liked it. Why do you not want to wear it? Da, 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 da. And I was getting quite agitated because I can't constantly wash clothes to, constantly have the only like one top or in circulation. And she wanted to wear the same top that she always likes to wear. And I was like, why don't you just wear your purple hoodie? And we basically had a face off between her and I where, I was like, I think she did wear the purple hoodie in the end. And then, because I was like, there was kind of nothing else clean, or I was just like, you've got to wear it. You really like this. You really wanted to buy it. Like, this is not something I've just randomly gone off and bought for you. You chose this. You wanted this. Let's wear it. You did try it on. And maybe she didn't try it on, but we knew that it fitted her. She tried it on when she got home. Anyway, I sort of thought about it, and I thought, I wonder why, when we'd finished having this argument in the morning, later in the day, I was thinking about it, and I was wondering about what is it about this hoodie that she doesn't like, and what is it about other tops that she does like? And she said to me, she really doesn't like it because it's too far away from her body, that there's too much space in between herself and the hoodie, basically. And it really made me, it's obviously all about, it's about touch. And I think it's also about proprioception, where she likes things that are closer and tighter and in some sense contain her. And it made me really reflect on how many things, I mean, it's a vast universe of stuff that's impacted by our sensory experience, and how things in parenting, when you buy your children clothes, especially when they've chosen them with you and you want them to wear them, and you can't kind of, I mean, my one daughter does wear the same things repeatedly. And I've become much more aware of what she needs. And that one daughter, I have started to buy her like little tight vest tops to give her that kind of containment underneath a t-shirt. Because what I've realized is she likes things that are smaller and tighter, which may not necessarily be optimal in terms of kind of going out in the world. But I just found it really, really fascinating. And I wanted to share this with you because I wonder what things are going on in your household, which are driven by sensory experiences, by any of them, by, touch, by auditory, by visual, because there's so many ways in which our sensory systems are impacted, and that we all have different kind of experiences. And I felt really grateful and happy that she could tell me, she could verbalize more about her own sensory experience, so I can help support her in that. You may have to be more of a detective if your children are younger, or if they can't quite verbalize it. And so I want to kind of just really invite you, and for yourself as well, notice what you like to wear. Notice what situations you seek out or do not seek out. Notice if you're very clumsy or if your children are very clumsy. Notice maybe, do they get a lot of bruises? Maybe they have a high threshold for touch. Maybe they're constantly banging into stuff. And I really want to invite you to hold this in a loving, non-judgmental, open way, because gathering this sort of information is so helpful in terms of living a life with more peace, essentially, because it's very jarring if we've got competing sensory needs and if we don't know what is going on. It can be easy to assign oh, this is like, it can be, you can like go down a road of saying this is bad behavior, or, I mean, that's quite a sort of an unhelpful approach, I think, because behavior is always communicating something to us, but it's really helpful to understand so that you can then support. And this applies as much to ourselves as our children. I don't want you to leave yourself out of the circle of care. Your sensory needs are right into that circle of care. Okay. And let me know if this is interesting or resonates, because as I said, I don't know, somewhere in the middle of this episode, there's so many ideas bursting out of me. And sometimes I don't know if they're that useful, or, if you want to hear more about this. Okay, I'm sending you all a lot of love, and I'm wishing for you that you have a good week. Okay, take really good care.